What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down 3 different ways that you guys can run a slant route. So we're going to be going over this release here from Keenan Allen. This is some practice film that he actually posted on his Instagram this past week, and this is a perfect example of how you guys can run like a 3-step slant versus a DB who is in head-up press coverage. Now, a lot of times wide receivers off the line of scrimmage will do releases that allow them to react, right? I think a lot of times wide receivers, we talk a lot about it on this channel, like we always want to have a pre-snap plan. Like we see a look, we see a DB who's in head-up press. Okay, that tells me I'm going to run my route this way. This is a release that I like versus that specific look, etc. But sometimes this DB can change up what he does, and we as a wide receiver maybe have to use a release that will allow me to react based off of what he does. So Keenan Allen decides to use a split release. Now, I would say that he probably expected this DB to jump to the inside on this, so we'll talk about it in a second. But when he does this split release here, right? So he splits. A split release is essentially where your back foot goes up and your front foot goes out, right? And both feet come to balance at the exact same time, and you put your cleats in the grass at the exact same time. Because this position right here allows you to, like, again, react off of what the DB does because you have come to balance. So if this DB were to jump to the inside, he could work to the outside and work something called like a diamond release, maybe like a slide release, and we'll talk about that later on in this video. But when you split, you're just gathering info, seeing how he's going to play. So this DB kind of just sits to the inside or sits to the outside, kind of holds his leverage head up, doesn't really shade where he's going. So what that tells me as a wide receiver is like, okay, cool. I could just take off and attack his inside shoulder and go run my slant. So this is a perfect example of how you guys can react when you are having to run a slant route versus a DB who is in head-up press coverage. Because when he's in head-up press, we don't know which way he's going to shade. He could jump outside, he could jump inside, post-snap, depending on what we do. So that's why I love a split release. Now, you guys could do a split release and give like a little head and shoulder fake to the outside, maybe get him to try to jump to the outside and then work to the inside and run your slant. But that's just a great example of how you guys can react based off of what the DB is ultimately doing. So great split release here from Keenan Allen. Great job working to that inside shoulder, getting that DB to flip, and then ultimately running a slant. Now, this next release here is also going to be from Keenan Allen, and same thing. This is some practice film clips that he posted on his Instagram, and this is a great example of how you guys can use like kind of like a hesitation slide release or a hesitation skip type release. But before we get into this full speed, you guys, if you are a wide receiver or a quarterback and you would like to train with us this offseason, guys, we're going to be traveling out to 10 more cities across the entire U.S. for 2-day long QB and wide receiver training camp. So guys, go to that very first link in the description below if you would like to sign up. Our next camp is going to be in Las Vegas, Nevada. Then the camp after that is going to be in Seattle, Washington. Then we'll be heading out to Chicago, Illinois, Newark, New Jersey, Birmingham, Alabama, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, want some more information, want to know how you could sign up, go to that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you there. Now, again, guys, our Vegas camp and our Seattle camp are completely sold out. All of these camps listed, Chicago all the way to LA, will probably sell out by the end of March, probably mid-March, you guys, because we really only have about 8 to 10 spots in each one of these camps. So guys, take advantage of it. If you were planning on signing up, you've been waiting a little bit, guys, go to that very first link in the description below and sign up. All our camps will sell out because we limit spots and we want each athlete to get individualized coaching and individualized one-on-one attention. So guys, very first link in that description below. We'd love to have you there. Let's get to this next release. So this is a great example of like how when you guys do a slide release or a hesitation skip release, you have to attack vertical to make that DB think we are actually running a fade. So how many times have you seen a wide receiver, Keenan Allen included, but other guys like Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, what they'll do off the ball is they'll come off and they do this little like skip. They'll do like a little hesitation skip, hezzy on their inside foot, and then they just take off and go run a fade. That's ultimately what we were trying to make this release look like. When you guys are running a slant versus inside shade press, because that's where this DB is, right? How you can tell where the DB's leverage is in his shade, pay attention to the midline of his body. If the midline of his body is even with the wide receiver's front foot and like his inside foot is to the inside of the wide receiver, that tells me that he is trying to take away the inside route. He does not want me to run the slant, doesn't want me to run the post, right? So the best way to run my slant route, I can't like give him a move inside and then take the outside release and then try to stack him and go run my slant. Because my slant is only 3 steps, aka probably around 5 yards, right? So what we'd have to do is we'd have to attack his outside shoulder and outside hip, and the goal is to get him to open up his hips and run, thinking that it's a fade, and I cut back underneath him. So a way you can do that is with speed. That would be something called a diamond release. You could go right at his outside shoulder for 3 hard steps, put your head down, make him think that we're going fade, and then put the brakes on and cut under. Now, sometimes a disciplined DB doesn't necessarily believe that because you have to run your slant similar to how you run your fade because we're trying to make it look like a fade. So when he comes off the ball, it's not like if you never run your fade with this like speed release where you just take off to the outside, a smart DB ain't going to bite. He's just going to sit right there inside shade because he's expecting you to cut back underneath. You're running it differently than what you would normally run your fade like. So what he does here is he comes off the ball, he does this little kick step with his back foot behind, and then he does this little skip step with his right foot, which is essentially like a double step. So he skips with the left, then he goes right, right, and then he gives this little crossover move to the outside. But you see how when he's doing this slide, how far vertical he's going. He's working up field. He's not going flat. Because you guys have to understand, we have to threaten that dude with the fade, with either my speed or with the angle I take off the ball. So if Keenan Allen would have done this release and he would have continued going this way, that DB could cut off the fade and he could cut off the slant. But because Keenan Allen starts to work at this 45-degree angle, starts to attack that outside shoulder and hip, that's what makes it look like he's going to take off and go fade, and that's what gets us separation on that slide. So if we're going to do this little skip release, you guys, like what I tell my receivers to do, mine's a little bit more simple than what Keenan Allen does here, but it's all the same. Like conceptually, it's all the same, you guys. What gets us open is very, very similar. So what he does, what I teach my receivers is I'll teach them to kick with their back foot behind, and then they take a skip step on their right foot. So they kick with the left, they hop with their right foot, and that hop takes them on that 45-degree angle, and then they jab with their left foot and cut underneath, right? Allen does something a little bit more unique. Sometimes I'll have my wide receivers work a slide release, which is where they get this front foot, they take a jab step inside, they push, and they slide and kind of drag their feet and slow play it at that DB's outside shoulder, then they make a move. But we're always operating on that 45 to make this DB think we're just going to slide and go or skip and go like Keenan Allen is famous for doing. So this is a great example of how that skip release could turn into a crossover and make your slant look like a fade. Now, this is a perfect example here. This is a wide receiver. This guy's name is Jimmy something. I forget his last name. I want to say he ended up at Tennessee. This is a clip from him doing one-on-ones in high school. I forget his last name, but if you guys know his last name, post it in the comments of this video below. But great route runner, extremely shifty. And this is a great example of how you guys can like combine two releases together to make it look more like a fade, right? So we talked about Keenan Allen doing that little slide and go, but he did like a little slide and then he hit him with a crossover and then ran his slant, right? So what we could also do is do some type of tempo change off the line and then work something called a diamond release. A diamond release, they call it that because it looks like the shape of a diamond, right? Like if I'm this diamond right here that I just drew up, the two like angles here are like 45-degree angles. That's essentially why they call it a diamond release. You're trying to make it look like you were running on that 45 at that DB's outside shoulder and outside hip, and the goal is to get him to open up, and then we cut back underneath him, right? And then when you cut back underneath him, it kind of looks like the top of the diamond. So that's why they call it that. But we could combine the two. The diamond release, like we said, is a great way to run a slant versus inside shade press. You take off at his outside shoulder to get him to flip. But remember, we can't always do that if the DB's disciplined. Because if I don't run my fade with that speed release, that DB's going to expect us to cut back inside. So we got to make it look the same. So this receiver gives a little skip, and then he takes off on his diamond release. Remember, to make it look more like the fade, especially when we're in the red zone here, you guys. So he gives a little jab, and then you see how he does the same type of skip that Keenan Allen does, right? So he does skip, skip. Keenan Allen would have put the brakes on right there off of that left foot and cut back underneath. But what he decides to do is he comes off the ball, jab, skip, skip, 1, 2, 3. And you see, when he bursts up with speed, and that speed, his hips, his shoulders, taking long strides is what gets that DB to commit to that fade, and then we break back underneath. That is a textbook, like hesitation skip into a diamond release or a slide into a diamond release. You could do it ultimately the same way. But guys, that's an easy way to get separation on a slant. You always want to make that slant route versus inside shade press look like we are running our fade route, and the release should be pretty much identical.